So, part 2 of the spoilerific trilogy. Let's just jump right in. Massive spoilers later on, by the by. You are Max Caulfield, a photography student in Oregon's Blackwell Academy. She starts off chilling in her class, taking in the prologue's world building. I would make some comments on how groan-worthy it is that a freshman uni setting is relying on so many tropes, but no, this is basically how my first year in journalism classes went. After a freak run-in with a trust fund baby shooting an estranged friend in the bathroom, she warps back in time to just before her class ends and, using her astonishing new power, saves her friend from being shot. At that point, it's a matter of finding out what the altercation was about, reigniting her friendship with Chloe, and uncovering the mystery of a weird premonition of a town-destroying storm. Alright, so just to start off with, because it seems like this is the deal breaker for a lot of people, no, I don't think the characterization is that bad. But yes, Chloe says hella, and after that I think Gwen Stefani might stop suing Activision to take a crack at Don't Nod. But I really like Max. She's not some spoiled art student who only seems to use their knowledge as an easy ticket to Superiority Street, as half of Blackwell seems to be. Clearly this is someone with a deep love and appreciation for their craft, and even though I don't really get photography, Max has this energy for it which I can't help but indulge in anyway. Moreover, I think she's just a good protagonist in general. She ain't no space marine or mute scientist, she's a very young adult thrust into a time travel story, and throughout the myriad elements of bullshit that I'm definitely getting into later, Max's believability as a character is probably the best element of Life is Strange. She might not have asked for the ability to bend time to her will, but she approaches it with equal parts skepticism, wonder, and fear, and her groundedness, juxtaposed to her surroundings, makes her extremely and immediately likeable, even though, and in large part because, she's not a charisma machine. Chloe is less likeable, but their relationship is pretty good for what it is. Chloe has to bail Max out of a parking lot brawl, and while Max is thankful, the two immediately start fighting about Chloe being left alone for 5 years after Max moved to Seattle. It's your choice whether to fight back or be apologetic, but either way, by the time you hit Chloe's house, it's easy to get the sense this is an old friendship fractured by time and distance, but easily treated with helpings of nostalgia. Basically, it feels like a real ongoing relationship that hits a few snags but has an undeniable bond at its core. I'm tempted to say Tokomaru is still better, but that's probably just because I'm extremely biased. Though, funny I bring up another episode again. What was one of my conclusions at the end of that video? What is good isn't necessarily interesting. Right. Okay, so obviously Life is Strange takes a lot of cues from the recent resurgence of adventure games, mostly helmed by Telltale. Now, the only Telltale I've played, if you don't count the Poker Night games, is both seasons of The Walking Dead. Season 1 was basically the beginning of the comeback. And how to put this? I like Walking Dead Season 1, but I'm pretty sure time will not smile upon it, because in hindsight it has a lot of problems from a basic narrative perspective, some of which Life is Strange suffers from in seemingly blind allegiance. Cause let's not forget, it was fucking popular back in 2012. But The Walking Dead, especially Season 1, seemingly gets most of its reputation from its set pieces, so we tend to overlook how anemic the pace could be. But at least in The Walking Dead, there was one constant that made things move along, however little. You know, the fucking zombies. Life is Strange's first episode is boring. Aside from the bathroom scene, pretty much all of the conflict is catty high school drama, which especially makes no sense because this is a university. While there are rumblings of a greater investigation, you spend most of your time trading exposition or chatter with almost every player in the story just so you can be properly introduced. The actual momentum to justify doing this doesn't exist yet, so I spent my time in the first episode waiting for the game to actually start. It really doesn't help that your time powers are used for the most mundane shit. Putting a cushion under a fragile object that's gonna fall? Perfectly fine once or twice as a tutorial, or to prove someone you have powers, but over and over again, it just becomes silly. It's like Wolverine undergoing the Weapon X program just because he doesn't want to buy a can opener. The branching path setup, well, it comes at things a little differently. While it has choices to be nice or mean that obviously don't matter at all, most of the choices the game tells you matter are kinda stacked next to each other. The payoff of many choices across a couple of chapters come to a head at one specific point in a chapter, where how you've acted towards one person and what you've done to present yourself in that situation affects the difficulty of whatever persuasive activity you have to do. So it's kind of like increasing your maximum health for one part of the game each, which does give each choice some more tangible gratification. Of course, the question then becomes how much the success of each of these tense moments matters, and That's a can of worms we'll get into. I guess that kinda gives it away though, huh? It is good that tension is used well later on. God, the first episode is bad. And I guess episode 2 isn't great until the very end, but by episode 3, the time travel aspect, you know, the actual driving force behind the story is, well, a driving force behind the story. The final part of Act 3 is basically just the butterfly effect, and it makes for some more inventive puzzles. On top of that, the story itself becomes much more intriguing, with individual mysteries starting to overlap and create a real detective atmosphere. And Max and Chloe really start to shine here too, because most of their separation baggage has disappeared by this point, and you see them being cooperative with one another on the investigation. Chloe's rebellious manner and Max's by-the-book, just-a-car attitude interlock more than collide, so they're fun to be around. But the more I played the game, the more I also noticed something I don't usually notice. This game's production values are kind of sketchy, literally. The game's main character is centered around photography, but every photo in this game is drawn alongside their magazines and newspapers. This is a realism-centric game, aside from the time travel obviously. Wouldn't it be better if they were 3D renders? Well, maybe not, because the textures in this game aren't great either. I try not to be a graphics snob, but I don't like how ultimately static the faces are. I don't understand why people complain about Mass Effect's faces when the ones here are just so flat. Because this is an emotional game, characters are going to cry a lot, but every time they do, it's obvious they're just switching the face type to one that has puffy eyes, and none of them actually shed tears. But I guess I should be grateful for that too, because all the water looks fucking terrible. And this is a minor nitpick, but for a game that spends much of its opening hours referencing nerd culture, you'll see characters talk about Akira and Cannibal Holocaust among other things. It doesn't make sense for me to not recognise anything from the soundtrack, because it makes it obvious it's all they could afford to license. I know the youth of Oregon has this thing with obscure indie rock, but I doubt they would spend their time listening to... God, what did they even listen to? I think one of the songs was Angus and Julia Stone, maybe? Commence shoddy research. Hey, it was Angus and Julia Stone, that was a lucky guess. Okay, all the problems I've mentioned so far, irrelevant, compared to what I'm about to dole out, but it will involve major spoilers, and I'm not kidding, I'm going through the whole game, so skip to here if you want to play this game at some point. Alright, fair warning, good lead-in? Good, because I'm not even censoring the footage this time around. Let's go. So, by this point there's been absolutely zero explanation of any element of the story not tied to the whole serial rapist angle. Max's time travel, where she got it, those ghost does, her premonitions of the storm, how the storm even exists, which is meant to by this loose Splinter Cell free angle. And I did for a while because it didn't matter, but now the storm is bearing down on Arcadia Bay, the only explanation the game can muster is that the storm exists because Max keeps going back in time trying to change everything. This is on the back end of an awful stealth section, so you can imagine how annoyed I was by this point. Then there's the big choice, the one moral dilemma meant to inspire dialogue, the Joel saving Ellie from the Fireflies moment. One of your choices is to simply do nothing, camp out at the lighthouse until the storm blows over, presumably killing everyone in town but leaving you two alive. The other choice is to go back in time to when Chloe was first killed and let the timeline play out from there, sparing Arcadia from the storm, but obviously killing Chloe. So, the storm is a vaguely supernatural response to Max consistently going back in time and messing with the timeline to fix everything, and the only way to get rid of it is to go back in time and mess with the timeline. Are you fucking hacks? Also, good job with the message. If you're going back in time, then you're not living with your consequences or letting fucking destiny play out, you're just tampering with things by letting them go passively. And if you do pick that ending, then literally no choice you make through the actual gameplay matters. Way to reinforce your branching path, you dopes. But if you pick to let Arcadia die, then everyone you bothered to save along the way is probably dead, including Kate, who probably would have come back to life in either case if Max had bothered to report Jefferson before tearing up the everyday hero's photograph. And on a side note, I'd like to thank every asshole who put up trigger warnings spoiling this. This should have been a big shocking moment, but if I'm told to expect suicide in chapter 2, then it kind of ruins things, doesn't it? I know why trigger warnings are a thing for the people who need them, but not all of us do. If you're gonna complain about the backlash to trigger warnings, don't make it so fucking easy. Alright, I think that's a pretty good note to end on. I picked this up for like $13 in the Steam sale just a few days ago, and I guess that's an easy recommendation. Max and Chloe are fun characters, and, you know, I just like a good crime thriller. I really did enjoy Life is Strange. I know I'm underplaying it, but I'm not sure what to say about the story without spoiling it, which is why I just went on for 5 minutes spoiling the ending of. But it is ultimately as I expected. It's a game made by the creators of Remember Me, a mediocre game everyone forgot, and that's a timely joke, in the wake of Telltale's Walking Dead fervor that focuses more on emotional connections than deep themes and dialogue, reliant on a gimmick that's more of a hindrance or a non-entity than a help. With those sorts of expectations, I'm not sure how anyone could have expected an outcome other than Life is Strange being a decent but shallow detective em-up with one of the worst endings ever made. There are apparently plans for a sequel with new characters and a new story, but as much as I am a sucker for sequel to episodic games, even if they might be bad, I have to draw the line here. Maybe if Don't Nod's writing team takes on Kazutaka Kodaka. Apparently he's the only person who can write an ending these days. As for Telltale, I've been sitting on The Wolf Among Us for about a year. I guess I should get to that soon. And I'm gonna play Borderlands and Game of Thrones eventually, but of course none of those are part of the spoilerific trilogy. Bye. See you when I beat MGS5, I guess. A long ass fucking time ago, humans and monsters lived in peace, and they didn't, and you're a human child who fell into the world of monsters, and go! It's hard to get a sense of who your family is in the short time you know them, which almost makes your wife's death a literal use of woman in the fridge. Really, in a post-Resident Evil 4, post-Dead Space, post-Gears of 4, post-Max Payne, and even post-Deadly Premonition world, this rudimentary crap just doesn't cut it. Ah yes, Danganronpa. To answer your first question, it means bullet rebuttal, roughly translated.